this actually goes back. I made a little mental note of it earlier when you were saying how people have a very difficult time believing that the ruling class do certain, how can they do these crazy things? The topic of eugenics is so important for people to understand and for us to elaborate on, because it also helps us recognize that they planted those ideological seeds over there. Again, by indebting the nation, they also were capable of controlling where the science moved, what direction the scientists moved towards, and that was eugenics. So
welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Gavin Nascimento. Did I say that right, Gavin? Nascimento, right?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. Just making sure.
Gavin,
thank you. Gavin is an intelligence analyst, unlike any in his generation. He's a conspiracy realist, and he's known for his incredible attention to detail, his adherence to facts. He can boast of such followers on his social media as Joe Rogan, Billy Carson, just to name two off the top of my head. And what I love about Gavin is he really sticks to what can be proved by evidence. And his reputation is sterling because of that. And I'm very excited to have him on. Gavin, thanks for beaming in with me, brother. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, cousin. And I really appreciate the very kind introduction.
You're very welcome, my friend. You absolutely earned it. Dude, I'm like blown away by, first of all, your story is just, it's remarkable to me the way that you struggled a lot, but you found yourself in a remarkable way, and you just kind of took off in a blaze from there, and you've been going ever since. I would love for you to talk a little bit about your journey to where you are.
So that is a lot to unpack. I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah, because
give us the abbreviated time.
I'll try to give the sub notes.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to just make it clear that things are still tough. I actually have to update that piece that I wrote a long time ago, because that's life.
Yeah.
Which makes this probably even all the more relevant, right? Because oftentimes we view the obstacles that we face as being that one final mountain. But there was one person, I can't remember specifically who it was. It might have been attributed to Mandela, where he basically said that once you climb a mountain, the first thing that you notice is that there's still many more mountains to climb. So for myself, there's lots of mountains to still climb, my brother. The censorship purge that happened on social media, that is basically what just gave me a huge punch to the gut. And then I had major health issues, like inexplicable health issues where experts have no idea what the deal is. So it's been very mysterious. There's still quite a few things that I'm contending with. But before we get into all of that, let me give the abbreviated version of initially how I came up. So I am from Johannesburg, South Africa. It's a city very similar to New York. It's like the New York of Africa. So you can relate. It's also very fast-paced, very stressful at times. Cool people, but people can be very stressed out, and it's a little bit crazy. And then when I was 14 years old, so very young still, we moved to the US, and we moved specifically to Florida. And it was just so paradigm shifting. I mean, for anybody who's moved to another country, it's a fast track of either your mental breakdown or your disillusionment or your awakening, or all three at the same time. So for me, that's basically, that already I had a very unconventional background. I mean, look, I come from a rough family, the south of Johannesburg. It's a rough place. I grew up around a lot of unsavory characters that, normal people are very freaked out by, but they are not much different than anybody else.
Right.
There are certainly common threads in humanity And anyways, long story short, I went to the US. While I was there, I started to really lose myself. Coming from South Africa, I'm Portuguese. And within every demographic, within every society, there are these like stereotypes. Some are beneficial, some are not. And where I was coming from, being Portuguese and from the south of Johannesburg, there were lots of beneficial stereotypes. So I clinged to that as my identity. Then when I moved to the United States, nobody had heard of South Africa. Most people couldn't locate it on a map. Yeah, no, it was crazy. And I would get these insane questions, which are funny in hindsight. But at the time, it drove me nuts, where people would genuinely ask me, like, you know, what tribe are you from? Did you wear clothes? No joke, brother. And I mean, Johannesburg's one of the 40 biggest metropolitan areas in the world. So, and I was a little city boy. You know, today I love nature a lot more, but back then I was a big time city boy, and I had a chip on my shoulder. And got very offended by these things, you know. And it obviously wasn't their fault. You know, it's the insights of a population are always a reflection of a government. It's never actually the people themselves. Right? We all get targeted for indoctrination on one level or another, and the more powerful the government, the more powerful the indoctrination. So anyways, I went to the US, and I had this sense of my identity deeply compromised. And what made it even worse is that when I did encounter somebody that had any insight about South Africa, it was that everybody who had light skin was like a Nazi because of apartheid. And now I don't know if all your viewers are familiar with what that is, but apartheid, it's a Dutch, well, an Afrikaans word, which is a derivative from Dutch and German for apart. So it was a segregated system. Okay, it was a very racist system. But immediately, because I was coming from South Africa,
and you were white, who knew,
exactly, people immediately thought, okay, this dude has to be like a Nazi. And unfortunately, society generally thinks in these very oversimplified terms, not recognizing the complexity of every society, you know, everywhere, during every era. It's never as simple as portrayed.
No.
And even for myself, you know, growing up over here, we grew up impoverished. We grew up poor. My dad, he came up through pure hard work, but they grew up poor as poor can be. You know, a level of impoverishment that most people, aside from in the third world country, or in a developing country, are not familiar with. So this was a lot, you know, and of course, when I'll never forget, there was a world cultural geography class, and reflecting back on this, it's very interesting because unconsciously, this in some way kind of precipitated this path where I became an avid researcher and paid a great deal to attention, or to detail, excuse me. So in this world cultural geography class, I remember, I think it was 16 years old, there was a subject that came up, and it was South Africa. And I was like, this is fantastic, because now, you know, people can get a little bit more informed about what's going on there. This isn't the Stone Ages.
Oh boy.
You know, this isn't, it's not the 1970s or the 1980s where there's this crazy like slave system going on and stuff. Like there's a black African president, you know, all of these things. And unfortunately, it was just the opposite, man. They perpetuated.
Textbook was written by the victors, man.
It was so crazy. Now listen, at this time, I wasn't for a long time. I mean, even until my, I think, early 20s, I literally could not tell the difference between Democrats and Republicans. And I don't mean that in a humorous way. I mean, I didn't understand like the distinction between their politics. It was, when I heard politics, I was like, it's just all bullshit. You know, that was kind of my attitude. And it still is all bullshit.
Of course, but it's, your instinct was right on, but
but it's bullshit we have to pay attention to. Because as the saying goes, just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. And it is something that has a major influence, a seminal influence of all of our lives. And sorry, let me wrap this up, because I can go on forever about this stuff. When that came out and I saw the textbook, I was shocked, because like every other kid, especially back then, it's a different era now, but when we were growing up, this was a very strange thing. Like, you have a government sanctioned textbook that's teaching lies. So immediately, and as this happens, the whole class is now asking me questions. And I mean,
oh boy,
no pressure there. And it doesn't matter if you try to say, no, this didn't happen, because then you just look like the guilty Nazi.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So what I did was, the internet was still fairly new. All right. We did have a computer at this point. We had internet. So I just went crazy and I started doing all of this research, up-to-date statistics, and I compiled like a report and I brought it to the teacher and I said, you'll be happy to know I went through all of this effort. This is up-to-date information. Here's all the sources, the citations. And I say, can you please now teach the class about this stuff? Because all of that is either outdated by like decades or it's completely untrue. And here's the evidence to prove that. And the dude, he just said, I can't do that. And I didn't get upset with him because I realized he's binded by a school curriculum. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, it's interesting because that kind of planted a seed. It still took a long time before I started to get involved, but that started to plant a seed. And the reason why I initially went down that path is because at this time in my life, my identity was so compromised as an individual that it had been forcefully redefined. I didn't know who I was because we find ourselves in these external labels. So we find ourselves in frivolous things like skin color, like religion, like political party. And I don't want to denigrate anybody that finds a bit of empowerment from this, because if you find it to be empowering and motivational, whilst not disempowering and weaponizing it to, degrade other people, that's cool. I'm all for that. But for people who are looking for something beyond all of that, or if you find yourself in a similar position as to mine, then it's a tricky one. And so, I really began to lose myself. Already from a young age, I had a drinking problem. Believe it or not, I started drinking when I was 10 years old.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, you know how it goes, man. And by the age of 12, I had a habit with it. It was an addiction.
Yeah.
And I got into lots of trouble with it, and I became dependent on it as an escape, because as the great Gabo Mate says, all of these addictions, they really just to escape from pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how it goes, man. And so I went through just a complete self-destructive phase, got arrested a bunch of times, got kicked out of high school. One of those characters that your mom told you to avoid.
You're not allowed to hang out with him.
Yeah, right.
One of those unsavory.
Exactly.
He's always in trouble. Yeah.
Basically. And then I had to do some serious soul searching, man, because I was in a position where, like, because of the pain, and now the alcohol is not working, drugs are not working, sexual encounters are not working. Nothing is taking away this pain. Either I'm going to off myself, like I'm going to commit suicide, or I'm going to, I've got to figure something else out. I did consider taking permanent medication, but that's no different to being on alcohol all the time or drugs all the time. And I recognize that, fortunately. Like, I've been able to see through the bullshit for quite some time in terms of the system, but I never understood that I could do anything about what's going on, especially coming from my background and, you're not qualified, no credentials. And so I began an internal journey to really figure out, like, who am I? What does human nature represent beyond all the social conditioning? And then I did go down this rabbit hole of learning about how, the system, there's this massive machine where literally billions and probably trillions by today's standards, but back then, tens of billions of dollars are being spent on actually ensuring that we are kept feeling discontent, on ensuring that we feel anxious, on feeling,
kept in ignorance, really.
And absolutely. There you go. Just to break it down and surmise it, that's it. To keep us ignorant and unaware, because that makes us easy to exploit. It makes us easy to control. And it's very beneficial to a wide range of characters at the top of the proverbial pyramid.
That's right.
And it's interesting because now I find that society as a collective aggregate and whole are very much in a position where they're losing their identity. You get all this like gender dysphoria, and people have actually lost their fundamental awareness and understanding of something as introductory and simple as what is my human identity. And the thing about human identity is you have to ascertain it, at least on some level, because it's directly connected to purpose and peace. Yeah. So that's like the gist of it, man. And I got involved. I stopped drinking, and I basically found a way to channel all my frustration, all my energy, everything inside in a productive manner. And I also focused heavily on self-improvement and guarding my mind from all of these insidious influences, and stop watching, network television.
Yeah.
Just be careful of every little thing that your mind is surrounded by, because whether we consciously recognize it or not, we are absorbing that.
Yes,
and
we
more
are.
than us mentally absorbing it, we are emotionally absorbing it. So if you feel like you just all over the place,
dude,
it's likely because whatever is around you, it's slowly chipping away at your subconscious, and it's implanting things that are there to actually sabotage you and break you down.
it's absolutely true, man. And it's this argument is becoming, the fact that we're still having it, that I'm still having it, at least on some level with some people. I posted something the other day about this this experiment that the Army did back in the 90s. This scientist called Cleve Backster, and he was working for the Army. And this was kind of it was not a. It ended up being something they couldn't imagine, but they were looking at DNA and cell culture under a microscope. They were measuring the electronic activity of it, and they wanted to see what would happen if they subjected someone to all this wide array of, it was like everything from like war, like horrible gore, to erotic stimulation, to love and joy, and some really sad stuff. And they wanted to see what would happen to that person's DNA while they were doing that. And they monitored all the responses. And then they separated that person's DNA from, so they took some hair, they took some samples, they put it in the same kind of measurement, and then they separated it from the person, and they subjected the person to the same video. And they watched with an atomic measuring device, as simultaneously, in the absolute literal definition of the word, that DNA acted as if it was still attached to that person. And
I believe it, brother.
So as the joy, it expanded, the sadness, they watched it contract, and they measured it to see, and they were like, this is unbelievable. They thought maybe it was too close. So they separated it by blocks. They eventually flew the DNA halfway around the world and did the experiment, and it had the same results.
Give me shivers, damn.
And so people are like, where's this, where's the evidence? I'm like, you can read all about this experiment. This experiment was done by the Army. It was kind of unsanctioned, but this scientist wrote all about it. And he ended up being known for his,
I think I'm familiar with that dude.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with this dude. Is it the guy? He also did
plants.
Yes, the plant experiments where they put like these sensitive things on them, and somebody came, like a stranger came in, killed the plants.
Yeah.
And then
that's what he's known for, right? They're like, this guy's a plant scientist. I'm like, yeah, but he also
no, he did many things. No, he did many things. Yeah, he did many things. He did something with yogurt as well, if I'm not mistaken, because yogurt has live cultures in it, and there was a similar
That's
response.
right.
I believe it, brother. I definitely believe that, man.
And so you're absolutely right on, man. And it takes a while to kind of map it out. I did the same thing, man. I was like, man, why can't I sleep at night? You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, and this is way down the road, but I'm like, let me just look at, what am I watching? Like, what am I doing before I go to sleep? Oh, I'm watching fucking Ozark, which is, the acting is great, but it's fucking terrible. I mean, it is the epitome of human nature. It is like the worst of the fucking worst. It's like The Sopranos moved to suburbia, and it's terrible. It's a great show, but it's a terrible show, right? And I'm like, no wonder you can't sleep, dude. What are you doing watching bloody murder before you go to bed? And
the mind cannot distinguish between like thought and reality. That was actually a big aha moment for me, because when I was younger, I got into lots of violent encounters. I have a history of violence, mostly with bullies. Like, there's a whole long story behind that. In hindsight, reflecting back on my life and stuff, I can see now my problems with bullies were eventually going to go towards the ruling class. It was inevitable, because that's the true, like in the Hunger Games, remember who the real enemy is. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is just a bystander. Eventually I figured that out. But a major aha moment for me, because I got to this point where I had terrible PTSD, and I had just horrible anxiety. I couldn't even communicate one-on-one with people, just unbelievably debilitating, was when I actually read a book. This book helped change my life. This was when neuroscience was still very new. And there was a guy, his name was, I think, Norman Dodge or Deutsch, one of the two, I can't remember. He wrote a book entitled The Brain That Changes Itself. Brilliant book, still to this day. And it goes through all of these real world examples of how people overcame all of the odds simply by rewiring their brain and the principles in doing so. And when I read that, it basically helped me become aware that the mind cannot distinguish between thought and reality. And back then, I was always playing out these elaborate fight scenes wherever I went. And everybody was, like talking about me, and I was always very defensive and stuff. And don't get me wrong, because the imprint of that is so deep on my mind can still activate that program, but mindfully, now that I'm aware, I can say, stop with your bullshit. Come on, really, enough is enough. But the point being is, film works the exact same way. So when you're watching the violence on TV, it cannot distinguish. Sure, consciously we can, but how much of our whole operation is being driven by the conscious? Very little, right? So when we watch this violent stuff, and I'm sure you also know this happens to me, and I mean pretty much everybody I've spoken to who's been genuine about this, when you watch a particular series or film, it'll start playing in your mind even when you're not watching it. You might have a dream about it. You might wake up thinking about it. It might just, so all of a sudden now you have this precious mind, which already is a wealth of stress and all kinds of stuff that you have to be on point and leave this empty enough to deal with this stuff so you can do it productively, efficiently. When we start to allow these other things in there, it's taking up space of what would otherwise be a stronger, healthier, and clearer mind. And don't get me wrong, we just human. So for me, I can also like, I want to go watch whatever, like a particular film, The Lord of the Rings or whatever it might be, or The Matrix. I mean, and look, I want to make that clear as well. Let me just point out that distinction. Of course, films themselves and TV as well, it's not an evil villain. It depends how this device gets used, right? Like you can actually use it for art. The Matrix, which is like the modern day allegory, or Plato's allegory of the cave, it's art, so it can be used for good, and
certainly, and
it's good to also have balance, obviously, right?
And that's the key. And the greatest measurement is, how do you feel afterwards? Period. I mean, like, be self-conscious enough and be honest enough to say, okay, why am I sitting here and I'm jumpy, I'm in a state of stress because this person just called and I was very quick with them and I wasn't very nice. And so why? Oh, I just finished watching 2 hours of this show. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a little bit of self-reflection sometimes is all I can think. Be like,
You're absolutely right, brother.
But it's easier for people, and it's habitual, of course. But man, everything you're saying is really vital for people to start to become aware of, because, and a lot of, and look, some people, like I started listening to this fantasy series, this books, and they're a little violent compared to what I would normally like. I didn't know they were going to get that violent, and now I'm like 3 books deep. But I kind of tune out when they get violent, because it's a or I'll just kind of start glancing through the page. So but I want to see what happens to these characters. And I'm like, dude, like, what are you doing? What are you watching? Like, this author gets a little gory, man. So I'm like, but I don't let it affect me, and I know how to keep it from affecting me. And that's the key is to if you got to know how to detach or kind of skip over those parts that are going to be, I mean, let's be realistic. It's slight trauma. If you're watching shows where people are getting their damn heads cut off, your brain is taking in trauma. That's literal blunt force trauma. And so it's not healthy for the body. It's literally the opposite. That's why it's, when you said that after that, because people who have been paying attention know about the censorship purge that has happened and know about the ongoing, kind of conflict that's happening between, basically our, the Constitution as it was written and our Bill of Rights as it was written here in America, and the business meanderings of the all-seeing eye, the ever controlling oligarch elite that is trying to rewrite and recondition society to something more along the lines of what we see happening in China. They would love for that to be happening in some of these other free countries, air quotes for everyone listening, not on YouTube. And so it's, when you said that you started to experience some health difficulties right around that time, I was like, man, there's just no way those two things are not correlated, especially for someone like you who has come into, a greater experience through their ability to help people and speak truth, to a lot of people. And then all of a sudden your voice is being muffled. I mean, what could be more infuriating? And so like, when I heard you say that, that's the first thing I thought of is that correlation. Have you thought about that at all?
Oh, of course, brother.
Yeah.
Of course. No, absolutely. Because I can't remember who precisely, it may have been Carl Sagan, and I don't want to butcher it, but basically you have to go through the list of everything that's possible. And once you go through that and you are left with only the so-called impossible, it has to be seriously considered.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that that's the case, absolutely. But with my insight, which I have a very unique awareness of biowarfare and just clandestine warfare and how widespread it actually is in society, it's definitely a palpable consideration to make. And because people don't actually realize this is very widespread, and it doesn't even necessarily mean that they had to have been targeting me. If you look, going back to the 60s, the 70s, the 80s.
Yeah.
For example, Operation Large Area Coverage, that was the entire continental US mass going all the way to Canada, which represents tens and likely hundreds of millions of people, probably back then tens of millions of people. And they were sprayed by zinc cadmium sulfide. The cadmium in that chemical composition is a known carcinogen.
Right.
And as shocking as that is, what's even more shocking is these people were never ever monitored, their health outcomes. These tens of millions of people, their health outcomes were never monitored. It's shocking.
So tell everyone what the name of that operation was and when it happened, so that they understand that you're talking about something that literally happened in the United States.
And they can look it up from official sources. And you can
verify it for yourself from documents that have come out.
Yes. So there's quite a few. The one I'm talking about now specifically, where you can legitimately say that there were millions of people that were experimented on. They say it was just a test, because it was a Cold War. They love using that Cold War excuse. And right now the rhetoric of a second Cold War is going on, which give them the green light to once again do this kind of thing. But anyways, I suppose we'll get there.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, go ahead.
This one specifically is called Operation Large Area Coverage, LAC. And they sprayed something called zinc cadmium sulfide, which for many years, including back then, they claimed that this was completely harmless. Today, they acknowledge, and the World Health Organization recognizes that cadmium is a known carcinogen. And then there's a biowarfare expert by the name of Professor Leonard Cole. You can look him up, not a controversial figure at all, where in congressional testimony, and he's actually written 2 or 3 books on this subject, which you can find for free on archive.org, which is like a huge internet library. You just need a login, and you can access all kinds of great books. He went on record and in congressional testimony, and he explained that was absolute nonsense, because cadmium at the time of those so-called experiments was a known, not just a carcinogen. He cites a study from like the 20s, if I recall correctly, but during World War II, it was recognized as a bioweapon.
Biological weapon, yeah.
A bioweapon. So you went through the research and stuff, yeah. And immediately what that means, because people have a very difficult time critically analyzing and assessing information beyond authority telling them how to frame it, how to contextualize it, how to think about it. What that means, if you want to be frank, is biowarfare was targeted against the entire US population. In the broad sense, because if you're spraying the entire continental mass of the entire country, and it's a known bioweapon, 1 + 1 = 2, guys.
That's right. It's actions. Your
That's
words
it,
are they're fun and all, but all they do is help to try to elaborate on the action, and what the action is plain as day. And this is, you talk about this a lot, Gavin, in your interviews, and this is something that people have to understand on both sides of the issue. Most people are really just they're good people. They're just living their life. I have always believed that, I don't believe this nonsense, this garbage they teach people that that's human nature, and they're talking about like the fucking worst of the worst. That's not human nature. That is
not at all, brother.
That is terrible. That's conditioning, that's survival instinct. That's the worst part of human nature. But the default is much more harmonious and cooperative. You know what I mean? Like, if I see someone who's about to get hurt, I don't have to think about what I'm going to do. I'm just going to help them, period. Most people are like that. They have that in their hearts. And so when they hear things like this, there's a disconnect, because they don't understand why a power or a government or an organization would do something like that on purpose. There's a disconnect, and there's a cognitive dissonance that happens. And that's because those people don't understand that the government is a tool. It's being tooled by the same people who have been kind of shaping world events and doing these terrible experiments for hundreds of years. And so when you don't know the agenda, it's really hard to understand the playbook that is unfolding. Once you know it, it becomes obvious, and that you stop asking questions like, why would they do this? Because it's all the same answer. And so I just want to, I want to put that out there for people who are listening, who are like, well, this has to be a conspiracy, or it must have been an accident. No, it wasn't either. It wasn't either. And it's one of hundreds,
Yes.
And that's the thing that your work makes very clear. The detail that you go into and the documents that you find to source your work, it's incredible. So it's just one of many events. People, I mean, like chemtrails. People are like, yeah, this is like some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, man. Go. The next thing you're gonna do is
the BBC wrote an article. Sorry, the BBC wrote an article about that just a couple months ago. Still going on about, it's just conspiracy theory. When we have undeniable, incontrovertible documents, official declassified documents that show that yes, we were spraying tons of this chemical composition. Oh, but chemtrails, that's just a silly conspiracy theory.
I mean, and
it's just gaslighting, brother.
They did a number on people to get them to the point where even after that, it comes out, okay, it's true. Here, they've done such a number on people, and this is like, this is MK Ultra shit, that people are still like, nah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. There must have been powder sugar in the trails they were spraying. Why else would they be doing it? It's like, wait, what? There's a disconnect.
Well, you see, the good thing is, and I mean, it's the good thing. I mean that in the most liberal terms. Right. I really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that if we are trying to get through to people and explain to them, the government has officially acknowledged things. So at this point, it's simply up to the individual to take the initiative to corroborate that. But it's irrefutable. The media has been deafeningly silent because they're too busy talking about, Donald Trump and Joe Biden and these little Mickey Mouse puppet characters. But the reality is that these things really did take place. And if they took place back then through multiple administrations, including administrations like JFK, which, of course, in hindsight, we reflect on that administration as being one of the most noble and ethical, right? That's kind of the common theme. So to imagine that what was going on back then can never go on today is delusional. It is it is much more intelligent to simply be mindful and look deeper and consider that what's taking place with these unprecedented experiments on society, because that's what all of this is. It's not, and I'm not just talking about this fast-track vaccine, talking about the psychological measures that are being imposed on society the lockdown measures, the things that I have been on about since 2020, explaining that this is going to create an unprecedented mental crisis in society. And that's precisely what's going on.
Yep. Absolutely. And you know, listen, I understand the people who think that, okay, and I'm not saying that this is wrong or right, but you know, the time for people to remain, you know, ignorance is no longer bliss. You know, you said something in one of your interviews that I really love. You know, you were like, look, there's systems in place to keep people disempowered and unhealthy. And so one of the things that you do and that you take joy in doing, the work that you're doing, is, you know, making them first aware of the darkness, because if you can first be aware of the darkness that's there, then you can see that wolf in sheep's clothing, and you can avoid the wolf, because the wolf is there. That's a fact. That is
what,
you know what I mean? That the wolf is there hiding, and it's dressed like a sheep. But if you can't see in the dark, you're not going to even know it's there, and it's going to be too late. How are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones if you're completely ignorant to the danger? So I love that analogy that you made, and that's why, look, I'm all for harmony. I'm a spiritual dude. I meditate every day to bring balance into my existence and my heart, and it's why I can function, because I see everything that's going on just as well. And I don't, you know, I tell people, I was like, I don't know how you do it. If I didn't do this every day, I would go a little crazy, probably, you know, like I would be pretty angry.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
brother.
and so I have practices that I do to help me do what I feel like I can do to contribute, just as you do, and also to keep my health, to keep my mental health and my physical health. You know I got to do all these things, but I'm not going to turn a blind eye to what's happening, because the only
That's
way
balance.
it's going to change is if we all wise up.
And we have to. And what people need to recognize, guys, and this is something I try my best to stress, is, first of all, I recognize that you may be very disappointed with this earthly experience, and that's very understandable. I think all of us, at least the overwhelming majority of us, can likewise agree with that. There's been a lot of disappointment in this earthly path that we've taken, a lot of disappointment. However, the earth itself is not the problem. It gives us all of the food, all of the water, all of the shelter. It's not overpopulated. We can also get into that if you want to, but it gives us everything we need. And it's actually a really special and beautiful place. So the earth is not the problem. It's the system that's the problem. And whilst it does feel like it's unconquerable, it's completely beyond our reach. And again, we feel so discouraged because of our personal experience. We have to recognize, I mean, there's an expression that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the recognition that something else matters more than your personal fear. And whether for you, that's simply the prospect and the principle of upholding justice and integrity and humanity, or something deeper like the future generations. What are you going to leave your children? Because if we are silent today, it's not going to affect us as much as it's going to affect the generations of tomorrow. So I know it's a lot of responsibility. I know that in itself can be very daunting, but this is where we are at this point in time, guys. And I'm not saying you have to go out there and conquer the world and take on everything by yourself, because we actually exist in a time where we have more tools to create positive change than any other time. And those positive tools are simply how to promote awareness. And people say, oh, you know, but this seems superfluous. It doesn't seem like it's going to do anything, just raising awareness. The world, my friends, is not ruled by individuals. It's not ruled even by families. And I know that sounds crazy, but the families that are in power today, 1,000 years, they may not be in power. It's not ruled by even corporations. It's not ruled by banks. It's not ruled by governments. It's ruled by ideas and ideologies. And what the ruling class has is an ideology of elitism. So when the Rockefellers are gone and the Rothschilds are gone, just like the Roman emperors were gone in the past, they still pass down that ideology. And the way that we confront it and overcome it is by propounding our own ideas and our own ideology, which is essentially humanity, integrity, and truth. Because what they propound, what they stand by, is deception, skullduggery, and propaganda. And those are very powerful things.
Yeah.
But they're not as powerful as truth.
That's right. And there's certainly not as many of them as there are of us. And
damn right, brother.
When you have enough awareness, they no longer have the cooperation that they need. And they do not have the means to. So at any point in time in this human story, we can come together as one family and say, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And in that moment, that reign of tyranny and terror, because that's a great way to describe the way that they go about their business of ruling people, comes to an end. And it's got to be coming, because this model is not sustainable. Look at what's happening right now. They're doing the same thing they always are. People are waking up. You know, I did a video the other day, maybe it's 2 days ago, about, you know, we were just talking about JFK, Operation Northwoods, you know, and these propositions. See, in 62, they were the military industrial complex, you know, and the United States government still was a little married, right? You still had this kind of like confusion, identity confusion, which created a lot of.
It's still early, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was a proposition that went into Kennedy's desk that basically said, we got to take Castro out. We want to take Cuba, you know. And of course, there was the biggest reasons for that was not our problem with Castro or communism. We were selling arms to Castro and the nationalists, and Castro got the upper hand. The problem with Castro getting the upper hand was we had just bought a third. When I say we, I mean American interests, these powers that be, like the Bushes and this oil, the oil tycoons, had just bought a third of Cuba, and now Castro was going like this to them, saying, piss on you, we're taking our land back. And they were pissed. They wanted an excuse to go into Cuba. Operation Northwoods, one of the many, proposed that they bomb people in Florida and blame the Cubans for the attack and justify an invasion. And Kennedy was like, no, no. But I'm like, this is an actual memo that went into his desk. Now, this is back when they used to send memos like that. Imagine the memos that came before. This is one of thousands. Now, what happened to Kennedy the following year? They were no longer going to leave their whims to that of a sitting president. And that's what happened to Kennedy, you know, that and 1,000 other things. But that's just crazy that we live in this world where they would actually ask a president if they could bomb civilians and blame it on another country so that they could invade that country and take the resources. I mean, that is the world we're living in. People need to own up to that, you know, and they stopped asking permission, obviously, after that.
Yeah, the thing is, as people delve into this stuff, they all realize that that's actually very standard procedure. It's just that there is a delusive so-called reality that they have inculcated in our perceptions. And those perceptions are unfortunately molded and shaped by profoundly clever illusions in the form of entertainment, in the form of organized religion, in the form of politics, in the form of government-sponsored education. They've gone to extraordinarily great lengths to ensure that people don't have a grip on actual objective reality. It's been in the making for a very long time. So if you trace back any one of these particular subjects, which, I mean, we can go into any one if you want to do so, whether it's the education system, organized religion, all of these things, they have been weaponized against the people to actually remove them from recognizing what's authentically going on. Because what's authentically going on is the government, or government as an institution, is a form of elitist control, elitist exploitation. Now, I'm not saying every government has to represent that, but historically speaking, if you go through history and you look at things like private central banks, or if you look at governments, they have been recognized as machines of war. But we can't even recognize that today. We look at it, oh, it's a bank. It's purely financial. Oh, it's a government. It's there to give us nice roads and stuff. And people are beginning to recognize government's a problem. But if you go through the history, it shows very, very clearly these have been institutions to literally wage war and enslave either financially or physically the common people.
That's right.
So unfortunately, it's a lot of unpacking to do. And an excellent analogy is from the Matrix, where Neo gets the truth and then he starts to like have a mental breakdown and he collapses and he throws up. And this is, obviously just a little bit of insight, a quick little analogy, a quick little proverb of us. When we're going through this, because we've been taught these fairy tales, it's very difficult to come to terms with what's actually going on. It's scary. It's disturbing.
Absolutely. It is very disturbing. Disturbing is very scary. And that analogy is right on. And I've seen it and I've experienced it. When you can no longer deny what's happening, when you start to connect the dots, the level of betrayal that has transpired, not just in America, but in this country, because America was, shaped and founded by these same few power structures and families. It's shocking, man. It's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. And then of course, the first thing you do when you start to come to this is try to tell everyone, and they're like, that guy's crazy. He lost his mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Of course. But that's the other thing.
Journey, though.
It absolutely is. There's this funny image of like the mailman showing up, be like, hey, you grab me, like, you see those chemtrails? You're like, all right, I gotta get the hell out of here. This guy's crazy. But you said something in a podcast I was listening to that I was like, man, this dude, you said, and I heard you mention earlier, you said most of us share the same principles. We just differ in our perceptions, right? And the truth has to be, you have to be careful with it, because, a really harsh truth can truly be another slap in the face for people.
It can be traumatizing. Yeah.
Very
it can be
traumatizing.
Counterproductive. Yeah. It can be counterproductive for sure. It has to be delivered in a particular way.
And I love that. And it's so true, man. And when I heard you say that, it's a great reminder to me that, you have to build a bridge for people to cross. You cannot just ask them to jump and fall, because they're not, it's like you said, you don't want their experience with truth to be this negative reinforced, traumatic event. They're never going to want to go down that road again, So it's a very great point you made. It stuck with me, and I'm going to keep it in mind, because, this journey that we're on, you truly have to, the only way we're going to change is if we allow space for everyone wherever they're at. Right. It can't just be like, here's the truth. And, you're shoving people's faces. Yeah, that's as bad as the other guys,
Absolutely. Fear, the easiest way to quantify it is that fear is just as counterproductive as ignorance, because they debilitate you. Both of them render you in a position where you have been pacified. And that's what the ruling class wants. So when we slap people in the face with the truth like that, then unfortunately it just, and this also requires, again, a rudimentary understanding of how like brain science works, right, of how the associative memory works, which is that we associate things. So now if they have a really bad experience where you denigrate them, you make them feel dumb, which is something nobody likes, then of course they're going to, not only will that put them off, but it'll probably warp their perceptions, where they now are one of those individuals that are like, oh, conspiracy theorists,
those
are crazy,
damn truthers.
People.
Yeah.
Truthers,
Yeah.
So it's actually a big responsibility, and people need to take it a lot more seriously about how you deliver the truth. I like to say that it's not enough to know the truth. It's not. You have to know how to actually market the truth. You need to know how to share it. And I realize marketing has this obviously corporate connotation behind it, but I'm simply saying that keep it authentic, keep it real, keep it legit, but you have to be mindful of your delivery.
Yes. So well put, brother. So well put. We have a responsibility to be patient. We absolutely do, with people, especially. There's this great momentum that we have from the 2020 kind of the so-called health crisis that happened, and the way that it was marketed. to people, because surely it was marketed. We can't deny that we had a marketing budget for it in the government.
Undeniable, brother.
So it's not a conspiracy theory when you have a marketing team and a budget. Okay, so I'm not saying anything controversial. I'm just stating the facts. There was a marketing budget and a team in charge of it, which is another conversation.
Insane. Yeah, and it's insane. But it's crazy.
It is. Crazy. I mean, and people are like, there's so much money too. I mean, you could have been marketing True Health. You could have been marketing things that would have really, truly helped people understand how to be healthy. But that's not what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. And get the world vaccines, but you can't get them food. That's a cool story, bro.
We keep sending money to the Ukraine. Meanwhile, there's millions of kids going to bed hungry right here in the United States. I mean,
it's an extractive system, guys.
Can't see
that's what foreign aid has always been. It's an extractive system. Unfortunately, the way that we view the world, right, is that we see this perception that they have shaped for us, that there are distinct countries, and this country is at war with this country.
Yeah.
When in reality, the borders don't necessarily exist, which is why it's more that there are demographics and they can move. Some can move freely and some cannot. Some have free access to all kind of business deals and some do not. Some have access to the resources and some do not. So if you want to talk about the ruling class, and I know it's a very broad term, but I mean the elitist class who are hell-bent on exploiting people, and they basically look at us as just being their little worker ants.
That's right. Like cattle.
They can travel absolutely freely. They don't have the same rules. If they get in trouble with the law, that doesn't apply to them. They all go to similar schools. So you'll get, maybe a Nigerian president, an ex-president, and then you'll get the prime minister in Chile and the head of a central bank in Ukraine, and then high up in Russia, or whatever, an oligarch in Russia. They've all gone to the same school. These people will know each other. So whilst we're looking at these particular conflicts, what we don't recognize is, for the ruling class at the highest levels, whilst there is undoubtedly certain disagreements, they will, find a way to get over those disagreements because they have a mutual desire, which is to rule. They have a mutual goal, which is to control the people, and they mutually want to live in freedom. Yeah, because that's what they have. They're living in freedom. So when we see massive amounts of money going to the Ukrainian government or to the Ukrainian people, it's really going to a very select few officials. They don't even have to all be Ukrainian because it can still be funneled elsewhere. Right. But a select few officials, people within certain corporations, people within certain banks, and then they give them this money, and then they will likely recycle that money so that it benefits mutual corporations that are shared by a ruling class in America. That's the only reason why they're giving. Yeah. They play on the same team, brother. And this is something George Orwell actually wrote about. People know, everybody knows George Orwell's in the most trivial sense. Right. In the superficial sense, I know George Orwell, I know about 1984, and we know about all of these quotes. But what people don't recognize is George Orwell consistently wrote about how the ruling class are actually allied against us. Right. And they use war as another facade to say, to reinforce the illusion that, these countries are at war with one another. But the reality, if you actually, and I know this is a stretch for people who aren't familiar with that, I suppose I should have a little bit of, like a PS at the end of this note, that what it would require, and I've written, as you know, very, very cogently and meticulously about this with all of the evidence to support my claims. Historically speaking, the evidence clearly shows that the ruling class, they create conflicts, they control the outcome of the conflict, and the conflict ends up strengthening them whilst it weakens the rest of society.
That's right, because then they sell the solution. Right now,
that's it, brother.
They're literally funding Ukraine to fight Russia. Meanwhile, they're lending money to the Ukraine. So they're sending money and they're funding weapons. So they're making Ukraine put the money back into the military industrial complex right here in the United States. It's all based right here. So that when they say they're sending money, they're sending aid, they're arming Ukraine, they're giving the money to the same corporations that are owned by the oil tycoons, these same companies. They have different names, but you can trace them back to the same people, and it's the same names that you'll hear over and over again. Do they have to diversify the board? Yes, they have to diversify the board. It doesn't mean anything. That is all smoke and mirrors. I mean,
it means
Chevron, Standard Oil, they're all the same company that was like, hey, man, people are going to catch on. We have to start dividing the company into different names. ExxonMobil, it's all the same. It's always been the same.
It's a big chess game, brother. Big chess game, man.
And so
big chess game, and they are masters of deceit.
Oh my God.
It's very important for people to recognize that. And I don't want to sound patronizing or condescending, because I still remind myself that they could be doing things that go over my head, because the ruling class have done throughout history. I mean, going back to the ancient pharaohs, going back to the Sumerian kings, going back to the emperors in Rome, they hoard esoteric knowledge, and they take this knowledge, because that's true power once it's applied. They take this knowledge and they weaponize it against the rest of us. And how
do you think we ended up with all these quote God-fearing, guilt and shame religions? How did we end up with all of them? That's exactly how we ended up with all of them, for that reason. And I'm not some people are religious, and they've found a way to make it work for them. I've met a few of these amazing people. I'm not one of them. I had to kind of grow out of religion in order to find my peace and happiness, because there's so much guilt and shame inherent in religion.
Very disempowering. Very disempowering stuff.
Fear-based. It's fear-based nonsense.
And that's something that people need to recognize objectively. Beyond everything that you see on the surface, you have to still tap into your emotional intuition. And when you recognize, gee, this is making me actually feel horrible.
Yeah,
that's not a good thing. That's not a normal thing. Now, it's a bit tricky, because you have to get a pulse on it. Sometimes something can be upsetting you because you have like a programmed, unnatural, irrational response to it. So there has to be just a little bit of objective recognition, which, that comes along in time with critical analysis, critical thinking. And like you were saying earlier, when you do some self-reflection, and then you can just begin to gauge, like, why do I act this way? Is this something I need to, free myself from? And then you can take steps forward accordingly.
Yeah. And so that when we say that this is a kind of a grand scale thing, but what you need to understand is that the belief systems in place today in our society, particularly in Western society, come from this small class of people that have taken their knowledge, of the esoteric arts, of the true nature of this incredible entity called human, right? And the power of the creative spirit of each and every human, and they know what they have to do in order to keep that in check. And so they know that the belief systems are everything. Perception ends up being everything, because we are such creative powers. And so that's why you get these ideas about one God, heaven and hell. This is your like, how do you contend with that? That is traumatizing in and of itself.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you police yourself, what they did back in the day with the Old Testament God, or just with the biblical or Abrahamic interpretation of what this great thing God is, which is, it's incomprehensible, right? But they took it and they molded it and squashed it into this, and they
separated it, right?
Yeah, very tribal presentation. And back then they would say, God is judging you 24/7. God's watching you 24/7.
That's so fucking terrorizing, man.
Yeah, and then today it makes me think, like, I wonder if they actually do that same stuff with the NSA, because I find it very difficult to believe that they're literally watching you every move.
Yeah.
I think, because who they have to depend on at the end of the day to enforce these measures? It's the common people.
Yeah.
And I know I know, for example, I've had quite a few posts obviously taken down, and I've challenged them. I always challenge them. And every now and then they get reinstated because there's a glitch in their system. They have got these people hypnotized and fooled into believing, either fooled into believing that they are serving a greater good, or this person is just trying to make a buck, so they're working for the system, but they're still a common, decent person. And in this way, we have to remember we are united by our humanity, by our integrity, and by the truth. We 99.9% of us, that's how we live our lives. And I like to actually tell people, in regards to the topic of religion and any other particular belief system, even if it's politics, whatever it may be, beneath that, there has to actually be a foundational belief system that even precedes religion, and it even precedes politics. You can still have that. You can wear those clothes, but you have to have this foundational belief that is rooted in the principles of humanity, in the principles of integrity, in the principles of compassion, and simply doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because within these books, which historically have been edited, they've been manipulated, they've been changed. I mean, I can get into some crazy information about the actual legit historical roots of Christianity, which is mind-blowing and it's verifiable. But the point being is, when they add and they edit and they make these texts very ambiguous, right? If you read like the Quran or the Bible, and I'm not trying to degrade anybody, but when you read it, it's undeniable that it's ambiguous, which is to say that there's many interpretations. That's why within Christianity, for example, there's like 50,000 interpretations. Right. In that particular instance, you have to take a step back and objectively assess and then critically think for yourself. And you say, well, truth is very precise. So when you and I are talking, you ask me questions, or let's say that when I write something, I provide all the sources and citations. Or even now when I'm talking, I try to give clarity about what I'm talking about, because that's how the truth works. I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. Because there are so many interpretations within these texts, that's not a very high level of truth at all. It cannot be argued, because it needs to be absolutely clear. That's how the truth works. And somebody as intelligent a character as Jesus, if the words were authentically coming from his mouth, I am pretty damn sure he would be aware of that. So these texts need to be viewed with a healthy degree of suspicion. I'm not saying you have to throw them out entirely if you find empowerment and benefit from them, but preceding that, you have to recognize that my humanity, my integrity, my compassion, my desire to see other good things happen to other people as I would want them to have to me. So that when you do encounter something in the text that maybe advocates genocide or slavery or killing a baby or something that on a deeper foundational level, this is not accurate, this does not vibe with my humanity, then you can dismiss that. So I like to let people know you don't have to dismiss your particular belief system.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
It can be very difficult to do. But always have that layer that extends beyond any manipulation. Right.
And that will keep you from falling into some of these, BS traps, belief system traps.
Absolutely.
Not bullshit traps.
And they everywhere.
Belief system.
Nice one. There you go. Well, sometimes it's the same thing.
I got that from Bruce Lipton taught me that one. I can't take credit for it. But
Bruce Lipton's cool.
He's awesome. Incredible guy. And that the biggest thing I think that would help people is to know that you aren't separate from it. Anything that is disempowering has to separate you from your true nature. And your true nature is, from where I'm sitting and what I believe, each and every human being on this planet is a little individuation. It's a little slice of God. The part that you read in all these religions where they say that we were created in the image of God, that part, in my opinion, is true. Because do you have to think about the fact that your heart is beating right now? Do you have to consciously be like, oh shit, I forgot to beat my heart? No, you're breathing expression of intelligence that comes from something outside of you. You're not doing anything to keep yourself alive. I mean, you know what I'm saying, as far as, sure. I mean, you should be, but that's part of the journey. But I think I'm getting my point across, or I'm just completely ranting. Like,
no, you're good, brother. No, you're good. Well, look, we all, you have to be a little bit mad. Sometimes you have to go mad to come to your senses, as the saying goes. But yes, I hear what you're saying. Human beings are an exceptional thing. It's so mystical and inexplicable, our existence. It's really such a gift. And if we objectively assess it, I view that us being here on this planet, which it's a beautiful place. I mean,
it is, man.
The nature is incredible. All of these different animals. It's a dream to just go out and, nourish and quench your curiosity. It's a child's wonderland, and that is a part of human nature. Is we have this curiosity, and children always ask questions. That's our nature, is actually to be discoverers, to be explorers. And in that way, this planet is such a gift. But unfortunately, we have obviously the system in place that is unfortunately throttling what would otherwise be.
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
Such a good experience for the overwhelming majority.
Right. And
it's attainable. Like it's far from impossible. We can get
absolutely there. And, the biggest measure of success that this has had for some of these people is the fact that they have remained so anonymous and kept this really master puppeteering that they're accomplishing on this global scale. They've kept it very quiet, right? But you do have a great awakening happen, and as we enter the age of transparency, because you can't have government without transparency. There's no trust.
Yeah, no, it's impossible.
First of all, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm open-minded about most things. I'm not sure you need government, at least not in the respect
at the highest level. No, we will be at the highest level. We are self-governed. We don't need somebody to tell us. Human beings aren't, like you said earlier, we are not innately evil. No. We are conditioned to be just so screwed up in our heads, so lost. And then the middle class turns around and says, oh, they screwed up and they lost. Okay, well, you obviously planted the seed. And now you're saying, well, because they have these problems, we need to control them.
And the problems are created to continue that mindset. And that's what people don't see. If you take a few boys and girls of completely different color skin and you put them on an island and you isolate them and you raise them together, they aren't going to know the first thing about the word racism. No, they won't even know the word exists.
That's a fairly new construct in the human story, by the way. So it's actually so if we had to break it down to like a 12-hour clock, that happened at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's even actually sooner. I'm wrong. That happened at like 11:55. It's a construct, and once again, it was a construct that was weaponized and used to control people, because initially they began to use religion to divide people. And then this predominantly started actually in the colony in Virginia in 1676. It was actually called Bacon's Rebellion, where basically black slaves and white serfs, or white servants, which it wasn't that much of a distinction between the two. But without getting into the whole, debacle about the distinction, they were very similar. And they used to eat together, laugh together, party together. They had babies together. They were very close. There was no major distinction. They found solidarity in them serving the ruling class and serving this higher power system. And eventually they began to rebel together. They would even run away together from their masters, but they started to rebel together. And when the ruling class recognized this, then they came up with a huge propaganda campaign to solidify and reinforce that white was pure and it was a distinct race, and black was impure and it was a distinct race. And it started creating propaganda campaigns, which is not very difficult to do. The way for people to understand this, because things never change that much, there's nothing new under the sun. Take something like the war on terrorism, how they went and they propagandized and all Muslim people are terrorists. It's the exact same kind of methodology. If you do it over and over, it doesn't matter if it's black or white or brown or Asian. You can make any race look evil.
Use what works.
Yes, and they know what works.
They know what works.
They know what works.
What people need to realize is that at the same time, while they're doing this, they're sowing the seeds of radical Islam. So they're creating the true terrorists with their
Absolutely,
propaganda
brother.
over there. And that's what people don't realize. People are like, yeah, but terrorists exist. Yeah, they do, but they were created by the same people who are now telling you to be afraid of them. That's the hand that is, people see the person who punched, they don't see the person who started it, and that's human nature.
Who trained the pit bull? Exactly.
That's right.
Who trained the pit bull? Is the pit bull the problem, or is it the person that's got a whole bunch of pit bulls and beating them up and training them to be killers? Like, who is the real issue? And so what you are saying, and it's really good that you do mention that, about how basically they fan these flames. A very simple analogy for people to grasp that I actually used before is house fires happen, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you go pour tons and tons and tons of gasoline on it so that it turns into an unprecedented inferno that now threatens the whole entire block, right? You don't take a little teeny tiny fire and you add gas to it. So yes, there are crazy personalities out there, right? And but once you see this personality, they broke, they've got mental issues. Yeah. They're not going to do anything by themselves. Even Hitler himself, as I'm sure you read in that very meticulous, detailed publication that I made. And this is one of the most sensitive, but one of my favorite topics, because I am armed to the teeth with factual information on it, verifiable information. Even him in Nazi Germany, they would have never been able to have done what they did had they not been financed, and not just financed into power, but armed with the technologies, with the equipment that they needed from specifically the US ruling class. Absolutely. Families like the Rockefeller family.
The industrialists.
Absolutely. Without their help, they would never, Hitler would have been another Mickey Mouse. I mean, don't get me wrong, he might have been a fairly popular figure over there.
Maybe, that's questionable.
Yeah, exactly. It's very questionable. Overall, he would never have been able to do what he had done. Never.
Not even close. He wouldn't have had the army. He even if he wanted to, even if he had come to power by his winning personality, if he had rah-rahed himself into a position of political power, he never would have had the German war machine, which was built, by Standard Oil, by IG Farben, by all these corporate conglomerates coming together to fund this fascist dictatorship, which they knew they were going to reap the benefits of, because the worst case scenario, they're going to back the other side. They were already playing both sides. You know what I mean? And this is the same. They learned these tactics from World War I. The same people who sat on the Treaty of Versailles, literally were the ones who. So that came from World War I, right? And you had these same people who were like, okay, they put Germany in debt. They did that so they could lend them money. They made Germany, they say they had to pay reparations. They knew Germany would be like, how the fuck are we going to pay this amount? The amount was astronomical.
Yeah, it was unreasonable, completely unreasonable.
But yet they knew exactly what they were doing. And it was those same people. Those were the bankers that would then lend Germany the money and built their economy. And they built a war machine so they could do it again. So the fix was in from the word go. And that's what people don't realize.
Yes. And then also, and it's so important that we address this, because this actually goes back. I made a little mental note of it earlier when you were saying how people have a very difficult time believing that the ruling class do certain, how can they do these crazy things? The topic of eugenics is so important for people to understand and for us to elaborate on, because it also helps us recognize that they planted those ideological seeds over there. Again, by indebting the nation, they also were capable of controlling where the science moved, what direction the scientists moved towards, and that was eugenics. So I don't want to jump the gun here. I'm sure you've got it written down.
No, I was going to ask you about it. Go ahead, jump the gun.
Okay.
Give people a little bit, because it's on my list. Yeah. I was just going to I was trying to get to it. Tell people so that they understand. Give people a little idea.
It's a complex topic.
It is.
One of the it's actually not that complex, but one of the reasons why it appears to be so complex is because, once again, as it's coming out, as the water is getting through the gaps, it's one of these uncontainable problems for the ruling class. They are, of course, co-opting it. They're trying to mold it, and the way they try to portray it in society, whenever it does, if it does come up in the media, is that it's exclusively about white supremacy or racism. Those are the two words that they kind of use interchangeably. And when you hear this, that's nothing new. It's kind of the same old narrative. It creates more division. Those evil white people, so it's nothing particularly normal. Oh, these horrible things. So then for white people who had nothing to do with any of the wrongdoings in the past, specifically and personally, it perpetuates their guilt. And then it also creates this anger from other skin colors and that creates division. The reality is very, very different. So eugenics is actually an elitist ideology. It is an elitist belief. And when I say an elitist belief, that's because even white people were actually targeted. A lot of people don't realize this. So one of the most famous and infamous cases, which subsequently led to tens of thousands of Americans being legally sterilized, was Carrie Buck. And sorry, let me take a step back. Okay, so eugenics as an ideology, yes, it's elitist. What is it? Eugenics is the pseudo-scientific belief that some people in society, unsurprisingly, a very small minority of super rich elitist people, are fit to procreate, but everybody else should be pacified. And there is a lot of diversity within the field of eugenics and the ideology of eugenics about how to pacify people. But that goes from something like promoting birth control, something more insipid like Margaret Sanger, who was a devout eugenist, a notorious eugenist, which we can get into, to something more extreme like what took place in Nazi Germany, where they literally executed people. That is all eugenics, boys and girls. And this was very well known back in World War II. But today, say eugenics, that word, to the average person,
they don't know.
They have no idea what it is. But it's one of the most significant topics, if not the most significant topic in history. And the reason why I say this is because not only does it show how much of history has been concealed from us, but it elucidates the elitist ethos, which is to say it gives you some insight as to how they think. And when I say eugenics, guys, this had some of the most respected scientists, elitist scientists. It included pioneering politicians. It had presidents. It had the biggest bankers, powerful families, most notably the Rockefellers. They were all embedded within this movement. So the father, of course, it's rooted in elitism. So elitism goes back forever. But the father of eugenics was a guy by the name of Sir Francis Galton. Sir Francis Galton was the cousin and close friend of Charles Darwin. And Darwin's sons, Darwin's children, were very deeply embedded in the eugenics movement. And then this initially started in the United Kingdom. And then from there, it got transported to the United States. And it got picked up by very powerful families, people with deep pockets like Andrew Carnegie, who you go to his Wikipedia page, they tell you nothing about, what a great human he is. That's all he is, nothing about eugenics. And then the Rockefeller family was also deeply involved. And they literally had a plan. I've got the newspaper clipping, a bunch of newspaper clippings about it was openly spoken about, where they had a plan.
And there was a time when they could openly speak about it. They didn't have to mince words like they do now. They didn't have to rebrand everything and call it something else like they do now.
Even back then, people were vehemently opposed to this, right? So I've also looked into, because back then people could take, I don't know if they can still do it, but back then in the newspaper section, there was a section where people could pay and they could write their thoughts and stuff. Yeah. And even intellectuals and other scientists. So that's another thing they try to espouse. It's another time. It was in the past. It was acceptable back then. And that's also nonsense. It's another tactic that they like to use. Oh, it was just something in the past. But today we're so advanced and it's okay. Yeah. So anyway, just one more thing and then we'll move on is, like I was saying, eugenics is an elitist belief. One of the places where this was applied was in India. And they had several eugenics societies in India, which work closely with the American Eugenics Society, which work closely with the British Eugenics Society. Yeah. And whilst they were in India, and this was during the 70s specifically, they forcefully sterilized several million Indians, all of them through coercion, many of them forced. And guess who was involved in this stuff? Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, United Nations, World Bank, and Planned Parenthood, amongst others.
All
And
the
if people
same
think
people,
that, and if people think that that stuff has gone away, I mean, and there's so much to unpack there, but basically, after World War II, after what happened in Nazi Germany was exposed, after people became disillusioned about eugenics because they had a massive propaganda campaign to make it look like, oh, it's science and it's for the betterment of humanity. When it was exposed what was happening in Nazi Germany, people were beyond deplored. And when that happened, the entire eugenics movement in America and in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, they gradually went underground.
Right.
And they began to frame their arguments in a totally different way. Then it became about population control. So the Population Council was founded by half a dozen eugenics, serious professional eugenics members, and John D. Rockefeller III. They changed also, it wasn't eugenics anymore. Now it was genetics.
That's
and
right.
This is coming from world-renowned authors that say this. This is not a controversial claim that I'm espousing here. You can look at Edwin Black, for example, internationally renowned author. He authored the book IBM and the Holocaust, if I recall the title correctly. And also family planning was another one.
Family planning. These people, rebranding, yes, family planning,
big time. And family planning is a very popular one today. You know, this is to help people. It's for, you know, women's rights and it's for human rights and stuff. The reality is very different, guys. These people despise humanity. And I'll leave it to your viewers to do a little bit of digging into that. And I will be publishing that soon. I've had inexplicable problems with some kind of hacking issue on my site all of a sudden.
That's so funny, man. I just said to one of the women I work with on my channel, I said, I bet you $100 this site got hacked. And I just said
and it's never happened like it's happened now. Never. I've got security to deal with this stuff, but now all of a sudden they don't know what's going on. It's
unbelievable.
Crazy.
And I said it half in jest, but I had this intuition.
No, you're right. You are completely right. I've just been so busy with other work because at the end of the day, I've got a family. I'm a new dad.
Congratulations,
put these things. Thank you, brother. Best thing ever, man.
Little
humans are the best. Don't be scared to have one. I was petrified to have one, but they are magic.
Oh, I'm so happy for you, man. Boy or girl?
Thanks, my brother. He's a little boy. Yeah.
Nice, dude.
He's my little dude.
Oh, it's gonna change everything, man. Yeah. Wait till he starts smiling at you. How old?
No, he's almost 2.
He's 2 now. Okay. So
yeah, he's almost 2. No, he's amazing, man. That guy owns me, and he's just something else, man. Yeah, such a special
so awesome
guy.
You know, and God, you look at if you have children, you understand. You know, there's there has to be this kind of, they have to be taught from a very young age in order to detach from their empathy. And once in a while, you know, one of the family members has enough consciousness where they stray and they start to say, you know, look, man, but they get ousted and they get quieted. You know what I mean? Like even in the Kennedys, look at RFK Jr. right now. His whole family has disowned him. His whole family, you know what I mean? Like his, you know, his, that's he is like, he's a constant voice against the machine, you know, and
the irony is what happened to his dad and what happened to his uncle is happening to him in a different way.
Yeah. He's one of my heroes. I don't have a lot of them, but he just is relentless, man. He, you know, it takes giant freaking cojones to stand up against that kind of power.
Absolutely,
and he,
brother.
you know, he's still going, and people say he's anti this and anti that. And I'm like, the guy was trying to expose the fact that the fishing, that the pollution in the ocean has gotten so bad that people are eating fish and getting cancer, you know, and then all these cases started to come to him about different injuries from different, you know, schedules and mandatory jabs that we have. And, and so he became this spokesperson. I found out from someone that his voice, which isn't the first time I've heard this as a side effect, as a symptom, came from damage from, you know, a shot. And I was like, well, I didn't know that at all.
I didn't know that either.
But I had heard that is one of the neurological side effects.
Look, it can do. There's all kinds of shit that goes on, but That's another thing that was lost a long time ago, is this red tape that, we haven't established the science. Big Tobacco did a lot of that bullshit back in the day. Yeah. And when you have the power of propaganda on your side, I mean, like, again, the topic of eugenics is such an explosive topic, and yet how many people know about it? If that doesn't, in one word, help you understand, like, how incredibly powerful the system is actually at concealing reality from you, then nothing else does. I mean, it's unbelievable. To me, it still blows my mind that there was this massive campaign with such rich history, with the most powerful people in every field, including science, and hardly anybody knows about this. It's not taught in schools.
No.
So when you become aware of that, so I try to always raise this to people, when you become aware of that and you actually dig into it, because there's enough information that can be found from mainstream sources to establish, like, wow, this really did happen. When you become aware of that, you have to confront the reality that, yes, I can be fooled on a massive, massive scale. And the whole of society, not just us as individuals, but the whole of society.
I think that my first wake-up call was, my wife was like, you have to watch this documentary with me. And I was like, fuck. Because I was just like, I didn't know what it was. And my immediate reaction was like, damn it. Okay, fine. And it was called, I was like, I'm so busy. It's called The Business of Being Born. She was pregnant with our first son. And I watched this film and I was like, holy shit. The Business of Being Born, it's called. If you are expecting, or if you know someone who's expecting, watch this documentary. It's only about 90 minutes, but man, you start to see what is going on in the hospitals with the business of being born, with what they're doing to these women.
I've never seen it.
Huge
it's
business.
Definitely a big business. I'll vouch for that.
And just the way that they're treating these women to get them in and out, and not only that, but then the effects that the systemic effects it's having on the child and the mother, because of it's all about getting them in and out of that bed as fast as possible so they can fill it up again. I was like, whoa, what a scam. What, that is crazy. So I got a doula for my wife, and I was like, I have to protect her and the baby from the hospital, from what they will do to her if she's just another number. If you don't know how, knowledge is power. And it's power that can be used to protect yourself against these systems in place. That is why Gavin's work is so important. That's why these conversations are so important to have, because you need to be aware, or you could end up suffering. These women who are cesarean, they're in and out, and they have this tremendous trauma in their belly, a huge scar, and they don't realize that it was all for nothing. It was just so that they could charge more money. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, brother. So let me tell you about this. Excuse me. My fiance, right? She fell pregnant just before the so-called pandemic, and then she had our baby during the so-called pandemic. We had planned to have a natural birth, right? The midwife that we had to help us deliver the baby and stuff, because we didn't know how to do it alone. Unfortunately, we've lost that strand of our history and stuff, which we'll come back to it. I've seen women do it. It's a matter of time. I think all of this is about coming full circle back to our true nature and our true roots. Like, they force us there. They don't realize how much resourcefulness we have within ourselves when we're forced to go there.
Yeah.
But so the midwife said we had to go because, our baby was a bit late and we didn't want to go. So we held off. But then, of course, you're very scared, right?
Yeah.
And you say, damn, like, the last thing you want in that particular situation is something bad to happen to your baby. So we have to go to the hospital now because we waited as long as we could. It's supposed to be emergency and stuff. So we go. Because of this COVID bullshit, I can't go with her. They won't let me go in. Yep. Yeah. My brother, I was so angry. But at that point, what can you do, without making things worse?
No. Yeah.
She goes there, right? Completely mistreat her, man. Just like what you were saying now. Just a number. That's it, brother. And
especially in that kind of a panic atmosphere, my God, it's 10 times worse.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that shit is. It's crazy. So yeah, people need to just realize like it's so tough, but we're getting fed such large amounts of bullshit
Yeah,
that we have to stop and just genuinely question reality. And it kind of sucks, but by default, you have to be suspicious of the system.
yeah.
And that's not just me talking as somebody that's paranoid. This is a consistent theme, a verifiable theme throughout history. It can be corroborated by even mainstream textbooks.
Yeah.
It's a consistent theme. So it's very important to critically think for oneself and also realize that there are many examples where an entire society can be duped and fooled into taking the wrong path.
That's right. No doubt about it. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that we are literally sitting in that seat as we speak.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We in
the front seat.
We got the front row because we can see what's going down.
Yeah, we're in the front seat, and it's not even a plane or a bus; it's a jet.
No, that's right, and it's a hell of a spectacle. But
yeah,
I think like I was telling I have an 11-year-old son who, God, I'm always teaching him, and it's you have to go slow, and I try not to get too excited, but I want him to be,
Neo.
That's right. I want him to be able to navigate this world, and see through the lies, not like so that he grows up seeing through the bullshit. And
exactly.
so
I was that wholeheartedly, man.
And he's 11 and he's got a big appetite for this stuff, and he loves hearing about it, but I have to be careful how much I give him at one time and about what, and I was telling, God, I can't imagine what I look like if somebody looked out the window and saw me. I was sitting, him and I were in the pool and I was explaining something to him and I was kind of up in arms, and I was telling him, I was like, look, I was like, the same people who are selling Ukraine the weapons are going to lend them the money to rebuild when their country is obliterated. The same companies, the same people. So do you understand? I was like,
and
they don't want the war to
outcome,
end.
man.
That's right.
That's the best way to control it. If you control debt, there's actually a movie called The International. Brilliant movie. So funny because when I first watched it, completely went over my head. I was like, yeah, it's a pretty good action movie.
Yeah.
When I watched it after having my little awakening, I was like, whoa. All about how basically the shadow government works, and also, how basically you use debt to entrap an entire nation. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. That's all. He was just looking, he was watching me and he was like shaking his head. And I was like, I'm just, and I remind him, I'm like, the only way that this is going to fix itself is when people become aware of what's happening. I was like, and that the people become mindful and compassionate, because if you live in a world where everybody is mindful and compassionate, you're not going to be able to operate in the way that you were. I was like, so,
yeah,
I'm teaching you these things, not so you could go off and try and battle them, because you don't pick a fight you can't win.
It's a chess game.
It's right.
I was like, but you get these people that are like, you've already lost the plot, brother.
You're peeing in the wind. That's not.
There you go. You are taking a piss in the wind for sure.
That's right. I was like, but you know the truth, but you focus here, and that affects everyone around you. It affects everything around you. That
exactly. Yeah.
And the more we can do that as a society, the less room there's going to be for these players to operate. I was at a conference a couple of weekends ago, and we sent a lot of heartfelt energy to these people who are controlling this technology, controlling the narrative. We we put our minds together, and it's almost like a prayer, but we were meditating. I guess it's prayer in the way that it's supposed to function, right?
I know what you mean. Yeah,
it's a very strong, loving thing to do.
Positive energy. Yeah,
and I'm like, that's what that is gonna expedite and change things. The more we can have, and this sounds crazy to say because it's been ruthless, but the more we can even have compassion for these people who have been perpetrating this on the human race, it's going to change them quicker, right? We have to be more evolved and in a true way, more enlightened, filled with more light, and that will change them too. And even as I say this, I'm like, that's, that was a hard pill for me to swallow when he said that, but I'm like, but that's the answer, man. We have to be bigger hearted, and that's going to affect them eventually. That's it, because they're operating on their own belief system, and that's got to crumble. They have to see that this is not, the rest of the world is not cattle for them to manage. We're not just assets that to be, the scarcity mindset that they're raised with. We got to get over that.
Look, the trouble for me is I don't actually think that they will, brother.
Oh, well,
genuinely. Genuinely, I don't, man, because a lot of the wrongs that happen, like on petty criminal activity, and even sometimes people who engage in what we consider, we don't even actually have, again, the positive perception of what actual big time criminality represents, which is like war and banking. That's true proper criminality.
Yeah.
But even on the lower level, that happens because, yes, people are operating from a place of scarcity. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but it basically enacts, or it activates, like the reptilian brain of ourselves. So scarcity actually damages the brain. It damages our DNA. It puts us in a fight or flight mode. And fight or flight back in the day, obviously the saber-tooth tiger or whatever. Right. Today it's drugs, it's sex, which is why you'll see in very poor communities oftentimes, they're having too many babies. It's a form of escape. That's all it is. It's an impulsive form of escape. Also violence. You'll find all of these things, rape and stuff like that. It's most prevalent in the places where there is the most artificial scarcity. And I say artificial scarcity deliberately because it's artificial. These people, however, are coming from a place of great abundance. They have no want of anything. They also have the esoteric knowledge to actually know that human nature it's actually a beautiful thing. I've gone through all of these different experiments and these studies that the Rockefeller family have sponsored through their Rockefeller Foundation predominantly, and they are well aware that human nature is actually it's a beautiful thing, and yet they choose to not just be an enemy against humanity, but they do it with a smile on their face. And what troubles me with that approach, and I'm not saying that I'm a firm believer, like if you feel convicted inside, you should follow your heart. I've got to say, man, just follow your heart, not the crowd. Like I think we all have on the deepest level a kind of purpose, if you want to call it a program, but a divine program that if we follow it, we play our part in this grand scheme of things. But because they are so manipulative and so skilled in deception, it's very difficult to ever take them at earnest. It's very difficult.
No doubt.
It's kind of like the whole pedophile thing, right? You get a lot of these pedophiles that are trying, and I used to work with a child sex trafficking organization, so I know them, like the mindset, the psychology very well. And then they're so skilled. They're trying to, we need rights and we need to be assimilated into society. But then they'll turn around right away and start violating children again. So it's a tricky one to make the decision and say, can we trust these people? Or should we, and if we do, what are the implications?
Right.
Because let's say we give them that space because we are noble and earnest and good, decent human beings, which that's their favorite thing to exploit and weaponize.
Right. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if we do that, what could the potential implications and repercussions be on the actual innocent people, the innocent children and stuff in society?
Well,
so for me, it's a tough one to do.
It's a tough one. Listen, like I said, it was a tough pill for me to swallow, but I think that if you can sever the power structure and the transparency is there, it's just like, if you have one dog that is more likely to bite someone than another dog, then you keep an eye on that dog a little more. You look for the signs, right? You know what I'm saying? It's just, it's a matter of management until you are sure that that dog has been reconditioned and healed and can be trusted with the other children. You don't have to watch so closely. But I do think that, we as a society, we have to come together, and that means all of us, and the only way that I think and you see some of them talking, once in a while, one of the Warners comes out, and you'll get a rogue Mellon or even a rogue Rockefeller, comes out and says, why don't we do this? But then, they're quickly quieted and then they're forced to kind of withdraw. But, if there was a few more of them, if we could continue that momentum, I think that, then you would start to have some powerful rebalancing that happens. And look, it's happening either way. You can feel it, you can talk to people who are kind of on the inside, and they're like, there's internal struggle going on because people are sick of what's happening. And some people are looking at the world and they're like, no, this isn't working. And so that, you can rest assured that these families, there's a lot of internal struggle there too. You may not see it on the surface, but, we also have to remember that the more energy we can give to that, the new world that we want, and not,
Yes.
not the vendetta, because it's bloodletting is bloodletting, period. An eye for an eye and the whole world goes blind. We have to come to a point where we say, come out of the shadows and let's live in a new way. I believe.
Yeah, like what I think is definitely what you were saying about the transparency. All of the eyes and the tools that are actually being placed on us need to be placed on them. That's the reality. We need to have, we need to be able to know. There needs to be a lot more transparency about what they do, business wise, all of this stuff. Like once there's that will be very helpful. It's a very tricky one, man. It's a tricky one because
it is. The web is very dynamic.
And their nature is it's so antithetical to decent common human nature that this is why people come up with these thoughts and these ideas, which I haven't seen any concrete irrefutable evidence to support that they are another species or something.
Right. Then there must be,
That's why people come with that stuff. And look, it could just be psychopathy, because psychopathy, there is such a thing as genetically passing down stuff. Yeah. And if they perpetuate the ideology along with that, like Game of Thrones, people, they can relate to that. It gets concentrated. And for them, it's just such a deep part of their culture to be delusive, to be surreptitious, to present themselves as something that they're not, that maybe they can be reprogrammed, but it will definitely take a good amount of work.
No, you're right, man. You're right. But, and the other thing they do really well is they continuously put the most, ruthless one in charge, so that line can be passed on. They know that not all of them are going to have the heart or the stomach to do what needs to be done. And so I'm sure there's a very kind of strict adherence to, who's allowed in the family, who's even allowed to know the secrets, because we know.
I'm sure. Look, I'm quite confident as well that they don't all. I don't think that at all, man. Yeah, I don't think that at all. In fact, at the highest levels, whatever is being spoken of and what's going on, I don't know. And I don't actually know anybody that does know, because once we can open that door, that will, I think, give a lot of answers, man. Yeah,
for sure. For sure. Man, this has been awesome. We did, we didn't get into a lot of, we got into some stuff with eugenics, but I could talk to you for hours. We can get into a lot of specifics, but we'll have to do it in another podcast. I wanted everyone to get introduced to your work and you as a human being, and some of the incredible research that you've been doing for a while now. And tell everyone the name of your. I know your website is experiencing some challenges as we speak. But you have an incredible Patreon page, man. This is like a treasure trove if you guys are looking for information on some of these things that maybe you're here and you're hearing and you're like, could that be? Well, yeah, it can be. And there's a lot of proof to help you understand and bridge that gap of truth that some people need all this evidence in order to cross. And I understand that. A lot of skeptics out there, and I don't blame them. We live in a world where it pays to be skeptical. So Gavin, tell them the where they can check out some of your stuff, where people can go. Because I'm sure anyone who's listening is a fan.
Okay, cool, man. Thank you so much again for the kind words, my brother. Very much appreciated. Look, at the moment, I've been so busy with work because at the end of the day, I mean, we're regular people too, and we got to
Right.
pay the bills and take care of our family and stuff. That I've mostly been publishing at Patreon, where I've got a small following, which includes yourself.
Yes.
Thank you for that, my brother. Very much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you.
No, thank you, my friend. And over there, it is paid subscription. So it's $1, which to me, it's really $1 is not that much. You can pay more and get like more little benefits and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a paid subscription because I'm trying to put myself in a position where I can do this full time. So that's always the best place to find me, because I make sure that I am putting out all my research there first. It's very meticulous. Like you said, that, I mean, pretty much at the risk of sounding arrogant, but I'm just being objective, that the publications that I put on there are very detailed, guys. And
they're incredible. They're second to none.
Thanks, my friend.
Really, they're off the charts, man. I mean, there's a reason why Joe Rogan follows this guy. Billy Carson is, I mean, he's a fountain of knowledge about all ancient civilizations up until today. He follows them. There's a reason why they follow this guy, is because he does his work. He does his homework. He does not leave any T's uncrossed or I's undotted. So you don't have to be humble in this case, my friend. I vouch for you 1,000%. And check out this guy's page. It's
just under Gavin Nascimento. They can just find me under Gavin Nascimento. And then the website is anewkindofhuman.com. I'm also on all the different social medias, but I've been very quiet on there. I'm going to be quiet likely this month because things are crazy with the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm doing. And then in the pipeline, I do have a course that I'm working on entitled, 2,000 Years of Shadow Governments. And it's basically just to explain to people the patterns, the tricks that they use, the methodologies, and empower you with how you can actually defend yourself, protect your family, and how you can actually create positive change, not going to extraordinary lengths, all the way from doing something very, very small to very, very big, because all of it counts, guys. So there's no act too small. And as corny as it sounds, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And I'm going to empower people, in a very practical way with what exactly that is.
I love that, man. That's an awesome idea. Keep an eye out for that course, everybody. That sounds like a great idea, bro. I'm really, I'm going to help you get the word out for that. And I support your work as much as I can. And I appreciate your time, bro. I know, having a 2-year-old and being busy trying to keep things in order is not, it's a busy job.
Indeed.
So I appreciate your time, man. I appreciate you sharing, all your knowledge with all my listeners. And, I'll keep you posted on this when the premiere is going to come out and all that. And dude, let's, we'll do it again in a couple months. We'll pick a subject that we know is very relevant for what's happening. God knows what that'll be at that time. But, we'll get into it. Yeah.
We can even do environmentalism, man. That's a good one for next time. Yeah.
I love that.
Very important information there. Yeah, there's some good information there to help people understand.
Let's do it, man. You're reading my mind. I was just thinking about, man, I was like, man, we got to talk about this whole electric car business. That's
all of it, man. Yeah, it's crazy.
All of it. Yeah, we will do it. Yeah. We'll do it up, man. But thank you again, Gavin. I appreciate your time, brother. You take care of yourself. Brother. Okay,
you too, man. Enjoy your weekend. All right.
Thanks, bro. Peace. You too.